I've been talking to you for years about this really sickening alliance that exists between the United States and Saudi Arabia. And we've talked about how Saudi Arabia, in spite of sharing many of the same extremist religious views as many of our enemies in the Middle East, are one of our greatest allies. And about 2 weeks ago, the Saudi defense minister, Prince Mohammed bin Salman, announced that Saudi Arabia would lead a coalition of Muslim nations around the world in order to help fight terrorism vis-a-vis the Islamic State. Great news, right? I mean, fantastic, except for the fact that many of the views of the Islamic State are shared by Saudi Arabia's extremist form of Islam, Wahhabism. But at least Saudi Arabia wants stable extremist regimes rather than belligerent extremist terrorists or something, I guess, Lewis. Maybe it's marginally better.
Well, if whatever a nation ends up, if Iraq or Syria end up being basically like Saudi Arabia,
Yeah.
which I guess they kind of basically were like before, maybe not as religious, it's better than what it would be right now, right?
I don't think we could argue with that. However, here's the other side of the equation. On the one side, we have Saudi Arabia saying they are fighting terror, but as Ring of Fire writes, Saudi royals have been financing terrorist organizations for over 40 years, and Republican presidential candidates are not talking about it. Remember that most of the 9/11 hijackers were Saudis, but also Hillary Clinton is not talking about it. We don't hear Bernie Sanders talking about it too much, although he's talked about it a little bit. And remember, according to intelligence reports, there is a high likelihood that the hijackers of 9/11 were aided and abetted by officials of the Saudi government. We've heard from former Senator Bob Graham of Florida that he claims the FBI is withholding information about this. Republican candidates aren't talking about it. Secretary of State Clinton in 2009 publicly identified Saudi Arabia as, quote, the most significant source of funding to Sunni terrorist groups worldwide. Has anybody heard Hillary Clinton talking about the Saudis now that she's running for president? You'd think this would be a terrific opportunity for her to call out the Republican candidates for not talking about it. But no, because she essentially seems as complicit in the whole thing as everybody else. And on Salon.com, David Masiotra, I think is the correct pronunciation of his name, wrote that the alliance between Saudi Arabia and the U.S. is, quote, mostly a one-way relationship in which the U.S. is subservient and obsequious, essentially a harem to the Saudi royal family who collect all the benefits and rewards. Why aren't they talking about this?
Maybe the oil is just that important, or maybe they think it is really important to have what I guess you could call an ally in Saudi Arabia. I don't know. I mean, they can take care of themselves. Maybe we just need the oil.
Maybe so. And maybe it's the interest in sort of a certain type of stability in the Middle East that Saudi Arabia shares an interest in. The past year, don't forget that it has been a banner year for Saudi Arabia in terms of human rights violations. The Saudi government has publicly beheaded more so-called criminals over the last year than at any time over the past 2 decades, includes offenses such as abandoning faith, leaving Islam, or practicing witchcraft. I mean, literally an imaginary fantasy world so-called crime. The government routinely tortures and murders its own citizens as well as foreigners, yet we continue the relationship and we don't have any serious critique of that alliance coming from our Republican and Democratic candidates. The Saudi Arabia thing is perverse, and there is no sign at all that it is going to change anytime soon.
No, I don't imagine so. I think it's an allegiance that the military-industrial complex wants to keep, that the generals want to keep, and that the administration has always wanted to keep. So yeah, where's it going to go?